Hello. Today we will be continuing our module on human development with a focus on adolescent development. So, what is adolescence? It is a developmental period that occurs from puberty to adulthood. Typically, the onset for females is around 10 to 11 years old, and the onset for males is 11 to 12 years old. Historically, there have been some changes to the timeline of puberty onset. This can be due to the result of nutrition, obesity, but also other environmental influences such as father absences. The main goals of adolescence are to develop and accept an adult body, acquire advanced ways of thinking, attain greater independence from family, develop more mature ways of relating to peers of both sexes, and to construct an identity. So, the other issue that we have to discuss with regards to adolescence is how does adolescence differ from emerging adulthood? So emerging adulthood is recently a construct that's used to describe the stage after adolescence, during which individuals may still be experiencing some of the challenges and formations of their identities. And it has been created since the markers of the typical end of adolescence and early adulthood no longer apply in the same way. So as children live with their parents later, they don't start families as soon as they used to. We have this new period of emerging adulthood that is following adolescence and somewhat related. First, we will be discussing the pubertal changes that are associated with adolescence. Typically, this development marks the onset of adolescence, and this is through the development of sex characteristics. So in females, breast growth, pubic and underarm hair, and males, voice changes, pubic and facial hair, but it can also be observed through body growth and hormone changes. So there are many cultural implications for pubertal timing, for example, body image, but also social acceptance. Next, we'll be discussing the cognitive development associated with adolescence. So this is the beginning of the formal operational stage of Piaget's theory, if you can remember from the child development module. And this is observed by development of the prefrontal cortex, so skills of executive function, attention, self-regulation, but also metacognition, so thinking about thinking, speed of thinking, processing capacity. We also have increased perspective taking and abstract thinking in this period, but we also have sensation seeking and reward motivated behaviors. So, why do adolescents engage in risk-taking behaviors? If they have all of these different functions that are beginning to emerge and they're able to better regulate themselves, why do they still engage in these behaviors? So, particularly middle adolescents are in a stage where they have increased reward and thrill-seeking behavior drive, but they do not yet have the capacity for fully regulating their behaviors. And so it's in this period that adolescents engage in these risky behaviors because they have all of the motivation and none of the consequential understanding. Next, we're going to be discussing identity formation in adolescence. So first, we have Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, and this is an 8-stage theory that extends across the lifespan. And at each stage, the idea is that a central conflict is resolved. So for adolescents in particular, we have the idea of identity versus role confusion. So as adolescents are trying to figure out where they fit in, who their friends should be, what they should define themselves by, they might experience some role confusion as they navigate these different environments and spheres as they begin to fully decide who they are. We also have Marcia's theory of identity formation, and these are the 4 varying types of identity formation, such as foreclosure, where an individual commits to an identity without exploring the other options available to them. Identity diffusion, where adolescents neither explore nor commit to any of the identities available to them. Moratorium, where adolescents are actively exploring options but have not yet made commitments. And identity achievement, where individuals have explored all of their options and then made a commitment to their identity. Both of these approaches are also applicable to other phases of identity, such as one's ethnic and racial identity. And so we must consider that there are various identities that an adolescent can possess simultaneously. Next, we have social development. And so during adolescence, children shift from parents to peers as the key attachment figure. So they no longer spend most of their time with their parent outside of school. They begin to interact with peers of their own age and rely on them for their key source of attachment. So parental monitoring and control will also change as their child encounters other peers and begins to advance in adolescence. And this can lead to conflict in the relationship. But as children explore different peer and friend groups, just as they form different identities and explore their options there, they can interact with a wide variety of people. Adolescents also begin to engage in romantic relationships at this time, and this is very critical for identity formation and development because adolescents begin to experience romantic relationships in a way that will crystallize later in their adult life. These can also lead to some issues in adolescence. So these are just a handful, but drug and alcohol use, anxiety, depression, sexual health and pregnancy, academic and career development, aggression and victimization, and antisocial behavior. So aggression and victimization have always been a persistent problem in adolescence, but now with the prevalence of social media, it's becoming a more insidious challenge. And we also have to consider how interactions of these issues may be particularly harmful for certain adolescents, such as adolescents who identify as LGBTQ or adolescents with disabilities. And we have to consider how we can best affect change and help these adolescents who are at risk for aggression. Furthermore, we can also think ahead with regards to academic and career development. So not only are adolescents at greater risk of later issues such as unemployment if they drop out of school, but there are also short-term risks that are associated with school transition, such as anxiety and depression, that we have to consider. Lastly, we will be discussing diversity in adolescence. So, not all developmental pathways are universal for all adolescents. They will have differing degrees of opportunities, different cultural expectations they must manage, unique contextual and individual factors such as ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, and they will also have individual genetic contributions that can contribute to different pathways. This also raises the issue of equifinality versus multifinality in development. So in equifinality, different initial conditions can lead to similar outcomes. So adolescents from various high schools all going to college X, but similar histories can also lead to different outcomes in the case of multifinality. So colleges can have students go on to different career fields just because they went to the same college. It does not determine their exact developmental pathway in the same way it would for their peers. Thank you very much. This concludes our module on human development.